Hey kids, it's Dad here, coming to you with another video from the shed. I thought I would talk today about an experience that was very difficult and I would say powerful in my life. And at the same time, very enlightening and important that I think I was involved in it. So I was asked to be a juror on a murder trial. I guess not asked, you're technically just selected. So you get someday you'll get a jury duty summons, and what happens when that takes place is you're required to show up at the courthouse. If you're picked in the random pool, as I understand it, you go to a courtroom and then you get interviewed by the attorneys with regards to the case. And you don't know what it's going to be about. It might be a traffic ticket or it might be a murder case. Well, we went through the interviews and we went through the orders. And trust me, everybody that gets called to jury duty is just thinking about how do I get out of it. Anyway, they got to me and the attorney asked a very unique question. He was the attorney for the defense. He was going around and he was asking people if they would eat expired meat, which what the heck does that have to do with anything, right? Like, when you buy meat at the grocery store, it's got an expiration date on it. And I don't know. I was just being a little goofy at the time, but I said it depends. For me, what it depended on is how expired is it and where am I at in my life? In college when I didn't have a lot of money and it was only a couple of days expired, I might cook it a little extra, but I might have eaten it versus what I would do now in my life. Anyway, I don't know if that landed me on or off my answer to that question, but ultimately got selected to be on this jury. And they immediately started the trial right away. And they're like, this is probably going to be a 3 or 4 week murder trial. And, obviously everybody's like, oh my God, 3 or 4 weeks. I'm running a business, trying to pay for life and everything else. And so, but you settle in, they started the trial right away. And it kind of take you down if you watch TV or you read anything about, criminal type things. It just sort of takes you down this path where they're trying from the prosecutor side to tell a story about what happened and why they believe it happened to the individual. And the defense gets a chance to tell their story. So turned out the trial was about the murder of a UCCS student, same place that Mom and I went to college, prior or after we were there, of course, but she was a younger gal. She was kind of involved in the drug world. She was, as I understand it, a dealer of what's called ecstasy. Anyway, she got involved with seedy elements, and somewhere along the line, it seemed like somebody high up may have become concerned that she was a snitch, somebody talking to the police. And it was pretty clear that the police believed that they had put a hit out on this girl. And so to complete that hit, there were 3 Fort Carson soldiers who were sort of tasked with taking her out. So basically, they went over to her house, I think under whatever false pretenses. And at some point, one of the 3 men hit her on the back of the head with a exercise weight, and they bludgeoned her to death. And then they proceeded to do their best to cover up any evidence that they were involved. They left her in a bathtub, scrubbed down the place, and then proceeded to leave and try to get away with it. And from what I understand, technically they did. The cops were able to gather some enough evidence to try and, I guess, get something on them or get in contact with them in a way that would get them. But they got away with it for a while until one of the 3, who was hounded by, honestly, a detective who, to my mind, this case would never have been solved if he wasn't as aggressive in pursuing it as he was. And one of the three men had left the army, moved away, changed his life, got married, and basically agreed to cooperate. He, as I understand, ended up doing some jail time, but the person we were trying, of the three people, was a guy named Christopher Allen. And while not considered the mastermind, it was believed that he might have been one who actually hit her. Anyway, they presented the evidence, they went through the case, the defense did their kind of thing, and then ultimately, at the end of the day, the case goes to us as the jury. And the judge was looking for a foreman, and I stepped up. I decided that it was a good thing to take responsibility for. I'd seen all the evidence, I'd gone through everything. I had my mind made up based on the evidence. I felt there was no reasonable doubt that the guy was guilty. So we went in. I remember, I'll never forget it. We went into the jury room and I said, okay, here's my thoughts. See what you guys think. Why don't we all take an immediate vote, see where we all stand? And we all go through and we all voted where we were at. And I was actually shocked. There were several people that did vote not guilty. And I was trying to figure out why. So that was the end of the first day we went in. And I said, okay, we're going to be back here tomorrow. Let's go home. Let's take our thoughts. And then we'll all talk about what we're thinking the next day. So I went home and I went down and I wrote my case for why I thought the person was guilty, almost as if I was a trial attorney, and just what did I see and what evidence convinced me. And the next day I presented mine, and we kind of went around the room and everybody went to it. And what consistently to me became the theme was there were people who were looking for absolute certainty, not reasonable doubt, right? Like absolute certainty that the person was guilty. Unless you're in a room, you don't know what people are going to say. But the evidence was so strong when you laid it out. They had cell phone records of where these guys were driving and all kinds of interesting stuff that they presented. But as we dug a little bit deeper, really what it came down to, in my opinion, was people didn't want to take responsibility for making a decision of massive consequence. And that was sad to me. Ultimately, we kept going through it, and we ultimately came down to, do you think that people were there? And really, everybody did believe that they were there. And the way the law works, if you committed the crime, or if you're there when the crime is committed and you're part of it, you're guilty. And we were able to convince people, if you think they're there, you have to convict. Because if you think they're there, under Colorado law, they're guilty. So yeah, I convicted the guy, went to prison for life. Wasn't a death penalty sentence. Wouldn't have been sad if it was. They were terrible men who did a terrible thing to a young gal who wasn't making the greatest decisions in her life, but she didn't deserve to die the way she did. So it was profoundly effective on me and who I was as a person and how I saw the world, and honestly how I saw people as well, in terms of, I would say I'm normally a trusting person. It's a harsh world, and sometimes you're going to wake up to things that shatter your illusions of how it goes. So anyways, an interesting experience. I thought I'd share it with you. Love you, do. Love, Dad.